to have a debate.
Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Officials reportedly suggest that Bondi Beach attackers visited the southern island of Mindanao in Philippines earlier and stayed there briefly for a month. One of the shooters also visited a gun store during their stay. Thousands of long-awaited Epstein files released. U.S. Justice Department published first batch of documents featuring Bill Clinton and Michael Jackson. Files show little mention of Trump. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, U.S. strikes in Syria have killed at least 5 Daesh members. This comes as Washington retaliated for a December 13th attack in Palmyra that killed 2 U.S. soldiers and 1 U.S. civilian. Jordan has confirmed that its forces took part in U.S. Syria strikes. The U.S. Central Command has reported that fighter jets, helicopters, and artillery struck more than 70 targets at multiple locations across central Syria. Tunis's government says 7 arrested over lynching of 27-year-old Hindu man in Bangladesh's Mymensingh over blasphemy allegations. Tunis said arrests followed the coordinated action by RAB units. Bahrain has placed former defense minister and prominent opposition political candidate Azan Nai in pre-trial detention. This comes as part of an investigation into the country's failed coup attempt. Italian police have arrested 384 people and has seized 1.4 tons of drugs in a large-scale operation against drug trafficking. In addition to the arrests, officers had put under investigation 655 individuals, including 39 minors, and confiscated 35 kilograms of cocaine and more than 40 firearms. Document shows Nexperia's China unit switches to local firms for water supplies. This is after the Dutch firm stopped supplying raw materials after a corporate dispute. Now we start from Russia-Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin's envoy Kirill Dmitriev has said that he's heading to Miami for a new round of talks aimed at ending the war with Ukraine. Dmitriev has confirmed his travel in a social media post as United States officials prepared to meet Russian representatives in Florida. Ukrainian and European delegations are also in Miami for parallel discussions, mediated by United States envoy Steve Witkoff and U.S. President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. The talks mark a shift from earlier efforts when Washington held separate meetings with Moscow and Kyiv. However, Russian sources say Dmitriev will not meet directly with Ukrainian or European negotiators, underscoring deep tensions between the two sides. Moscow now continues to argue that European involvement complicates peace efforts. The talks come a day after Putin vowed to press ahead with Russia's military campaign. Despite growing diplomatic pressure, Washington is pushing a peace plan that includes security guarantees for Ukraine, though territorial concessions remain a major sticking point in the peace talks. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Andriy Lucidi. He's a war reporter, joins us live from Lugansk. Thank you very much, Mr. Lucidi, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, what's the latest that's ongoing between Russia and Ukraine? What more can you share with us?
Well, this is an interesting situation because in Miami now there are 3 official delegations, the Russian delegation, European delegation, and Ukrainian delegation. But yes, all these people, these groups, are involved in parallel discussions about the same peace plan. And this is very interesting because we know that the Russian delegation is there for work on the proposal from Donald Trump about the possibility of peace in Ukraine, but the position of the European Union is completely opposite to the Russian position. So for the European Union, it's not possible to agree on a peace between Russia and Ukraine without the victory, the military victory of Ukraine. And it's interesting for me, and also some Russian outlets spoke about this. It's interesting to see how the delegations, Ukrainian and European delegations, can work with the Americans without the possibility of peace. If they cannot agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine without their conviction, so how can we think about peace in the future?
Thank you for highlighting that. And Mr. Liciti, how aligned are these three parties according to you? And the particular individual who's joining them is Dmitriev, Mr. Dmitriev. So him joining, does it change anything?
Well, Kirill Dmitriev is involved in the negotiation since the beginning. So from the Alaska meeting with Donald Trump, between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, Dmitriev was involved very deep in the organization. And I think now in the Russian political panorama, Kirill Dmitriev is the better man that can lead such negotiation with the US. Also because he have good relations with the American side, in particular with Witkoff and Kushner, that both were in Moscow for the first steps about this negotiation in the last months and weeks.
And you know, you've already mentioned the U.S. Delegation side, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. These two individuals are particularly also Jared Kushner. He's a son-in-law. He's not a diplomat. You know, why do you think U.S. is choosing these particular individuals? Why do you think there's nobody that Trump can trust with this talks from U.S. side?
I think that Donald Trump is using a person that out the diplomacy system, because under the Biden administration, the official relations between the US and the Russian Federation reached the most bad level in the history since the Cold War. And for this reason, maybe Donald Trump want to try another ways to establish contacts and lead good negotiation with the Russian side. But also I think because in this way he have the possibility to keep this negotiation in like an unofficial way. So Kushner and Witkoff are not diplomats as professional diplomats, so they can stay outside this system and some pressure and also some responsibility as a diplomat. So they can avoid all these things and lead the negotiation in another way, like almost unofficial way.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for highlighting that. Very interested. And personally, do you foresee any breakthrough that can be achieved before next year? What do you think?
As a person that it's based in a war zone, I hope that peace can reach us before the end of the year. But in a realistic way, I cannot say that the peace is near. I think that the Russian side and the Ukrainian and US side need to work very hard about the peace plan from the US. Also, because there are some points that are not acceptable for Russia, some points are not acceptable for Ukraine, and some points are not acceptable for the US. So they need to work on these points and to make the peace possible for us, for all the people that are living here. And this is very important, but I think realistically cannot be reached until the end of the year. I think personally that it's realistic to suppose that we need to expect other 6 months, at least 6 months of war. Also because, like Vladimir Putin said yesterday during the press conference, the military results for the Russian side are good. Also, Putin said that he expects themselves new military success in the battlefield till the end of the year. So this means that maybe from the Russian side there are some maneuvers, some offensive that can reach their targets in the next days.
Thank you very much for highlighting that and sharing that insight. Also, I do hope that this comes to an end as well. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Andre Lucidi for joining us today and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Middle East. Jordan's Air Force has carried out strikes against Islamic State targets in southern Syria as part of a US-led overnight operation. The Jordanian military has said that the strikes aim to prevent extremist groups from using these areas as bases to threaten neighboring countries. The action reflects coordination with international partners to maintain security in the region. According to the Pentagon, US fighter jets, attack helicopters, and artillery struck more than 70 Islamic State targets across central Syria. Officials said the strikes were carefully planned and aimed at degrading the group's operational capabilities in the region. Admiral Brad Cooper has said the United States would continue to relentlessly pursue terrorists who seek to harm Americans and US partners alike. President Donald Trump has described the strikes as very serious retaliation following the recent Islamic State attack that killed 3 Americans. The Pentagon has emphasized that the operation was defensive in nature and intended to prevent future attacks, as U.S. forces remain on high alert across the region. Jordan's Air Force has carried out strikes against Islamic State targets in southern Syria as part of a US-led overnight operation. The Jordanian military said that strikes aim to prevent extremist groups from using these areas as bases to threaten neighboring countries. The action reflects coordination with international partners to maintain security in the region. According to the Pentagon, US fighter jets, attack helicopters, and artillery struck more than 70 Islamic State targets across central Syria. Officials have said the strikes were carefully planned and aimed at degrading the group's operational capabilities in the region. Admiral Brad Cooper has said the United States would continue to relentlessly pursue terrorists who seek to harm Americans and US partners alike. President Donald Trump described the strikes as very serious retaliation following a recent Islamic State attack that killed 3 Americans. Now we move on to our next news. The International Monetary Fund approves $206 million in emergency financing for Sri Lanka to support recovery efforts following the devastation caused by Cyclone Ditwa. According to reports, the powerful storm has killed more than 640 people and affected over 10% of the country's population, triggering widespread flooding and landslides across the island nation. The IMF has said the disaster created urgent humanitarian and reconstruction needs, placing heavy pressure on Sri Lanka's finances and balance of payments. The funding, which is provided through the IMF's rapid financing instrument, aims to help the government meet immediate recovery costs. The announcement follows Sri Lanka's decision to allocate $1.6 billion in additional spending next year for cyclone relief. The IMF has warned the cyclone is likely to hit short-term economic growth, with agriculture and tourism among the worst affected areas. Now we move on to US. New details are emerging from the Brown shooting incident. We are now learning more about the suspect, Claudio Neves Valente. He was former physics doctoral student and was briefly enrolled at Brown University more than 2 decades ago, before dropping out and disappearing from academic life. Police officials say that Valente returned to the Rhode Island campus last week armed with at least one handgun and carried out the mass shooting inside a building where he once studied. As investigators searched for a motive, the case expanded when an MIT physics professor, Nuno Loureiro, was found shot dead at his home near Boston, with police believing the two men had been classmates in Portugal in the late 1990s. Authorities now say both attacks were carried out by Valente, who was found dead in a storage locker in New Hampshire from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. New details are emerging from the Brown University shooting incident in US. We're now learning more about the suspect, Claudio Neves Valente. He was a former physics doctoral student and was briefly enrolled at Brown University more than 2 decades ago, before dropping out and disappearing from academic life. Police officials say that Valente returned to the Rhode Island campus last week armed with at least one handgun and carried out the mass shooting inside a building where he once studied. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Martin Sayrides. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Ecuador. Thank you very much, Mr. Martin, for joining us again. Good to see you. Mr. Martin, now that new details are emerging from Brown's shooting incident, it seems what can we know more and what can we speculate about what could have been the motive of this particular individual, Claudio Neves Valente?
Yeah, I think this is a terror attack fundamentally perpetrated by ideological hate. Right now, the investigations are looking around the background of the perpetrator, and it's absolutely disturbing to see this type of violence carrying out in the recent days.
Yes, and Mr. Martin, do you think that this particular individual could have some rift from 1990s with this MIT professor who also could have been shot by this individual, and that could have led to this incident after decades?
Well, I think that's very likely. I think this was perpetrated because of ideological hate, and the victim was already harassed in the past. So I think this is not like a lone wolf incident. It has been premeditated for years.
Yes, and is there any case, it should universities and, in universities be more careful with people who enroll and then who drop out? Reason could be, many of people's reasoning of dropping out are mental illness indeed. So do you think universities should be careful about such?
I think universities are failing to profile picture. Universities are, in my opinion, too liberal to accept any kind of expression of violence. They are failing into investigating a background check to check the mental situation of the students and to investigate what type of people are in the universities. There's a lot of students that are involved with terror organizations. There are terror cells involved in international terror infrastructure. So I think the universities absolutely need to take care about the profile of their students in order to avoid these situations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin Sayrides, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, Jordan's Air Force has carried out strikes against Islamic State targets in southern Syria. Now we welcome back Mr. Martin Tsai-Wright. Thank you very much, Mr. Martin, for staying with us. Now, looking at Jordan and U.S. Cooperating for an attack, towards an attack on Daesh in Syria, do you think there is a possibility that the current new president Ahmad al-Sharaa is failing to protect his own country?
Absolutely. I think the new president of Syria has other international interests than protecting all Syrians. He's a sectarian. He was part of Al-Qaeda. He's a former terrorist, but he's only interested in a sector of the Syrian population, not in all the diversity that ethnic and religious diversities that Syria currently has. I think he's trying to approach the US because of his own interest, but he's failing to be a president for all Syrians, and he's failing to achieve peace with its neighbors. He basically is failing to try to achieve a peace with Israel. And right now, we're seeing that he's also not aligned with other neighbors like Jordan. So I think he really needs to have a broader picture of the Middle East situation.
Yes. And what do you think? What is U.S.'s interest there? Why do you think U.S. has interfered?
So basically, the U.S. has always had interest in having a kind of inference or military influence in the Middle East. Jordan is one of its allies. That's why, for me, it's very confusing that in one side, the new president of Syria is trying to be friends with Trump and align with its interests, and in the other hand, he's failing to have a good relationship with Jordan. I think he really needs to put his ideology in the direction of achieving peace and protecting the Druze community in Syria that it has been persecuted by the current government and other minorities.
Thank you for highlighting that. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Martin Tsai-Wright for joining us as an international affairs expert from Ecuador. Now we move on to our next news. AI chip maker Cerebras Systems is preparing to file for a U.S. initial public offering as soon as next week, targeting a second quarter 2026 listing, as per reports. The company, which develops high-performance processors for artificial intelligence workloads, withdrew its prior IPO filing in October, days after announcing it has raised over $1 billion in a fundraising round that valued the AI chipmaker at $8 billion. The company first filed paperwork with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission in 2024, before postponing and ultimately withdrawing its IPO earlier this year. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around